Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us for part two of something that's probably going to have more than two parts. If I could just mention before we start that I have, at the moment for myself, I've turned off the chat. I find that when I'm speaking, and I find also when the Chazan singing, that it is a little bit distracting to be constantly looking at somebody typing things, and it makes for not as good as an interaction. So I do apologize if some of you will be making comments and I won't be coming in on those comments. It's not because your comments are unimportant, but it's because it ruins the flow of everything and I can't really focus on both. Maybe if I was better at multitasking, if I was a woman, maybe that would work better. But, you know, as I'm not a woman and I can't multitask, you're just going to have to bear with the man that's standing over here. Okay, we're going to continue now the Friday night davening with something that's actually going to be highly controversial, if you ask Alex. But here we are. Ba'ameh madlikin. Ba'ameh madlikin, as far as the art scroll and as far as many communities have it, they will say Ba'ameh madlikin. At this point, we finished last week with Mizmor Shel Yom Shabbos and Hashem Malach, the song for Shabbos and the fact that we sing the song of Friday. Then we have Kaddish Yasam, we have Mourner's Kaddish. And then depending on whether you are going with Nusach Anglia, maybe sometimes the Yekis as well, or whether you go with a Nusach around the rest of the world, you'll find Ba'ameh madlikin, which is a chapter in the Mishnah on page 322 in the darker art scroll Siddur. This is the one I'm using tonight. Or if you be using the green Chief Rabbi Siddur, so the most recent one, the Siddur by Rabbi Sachs, you'll actually not find it before the Ma'ariv service, but rather you'll find it after the Ma'ariv service on page 298 within this green Siddur. So be that as it may, whether it is in our shul, we say it before Ma'ariv, which is why I'm saying it that way. There are different minhagim, so some people would say it after Ma'ariv. In our shul, we say it before Ma'ariv. Did I say after Ma'ariv? Sorry. In our shul, we say before Ma'ariv. In many other shuls, they say it after Ma'ariv. Either which way. Ba'ameh madlikin is a parak that has a lot to do with lighting the candles and preparation for Shabbos. So we read about lighting the candles, what you can use for lighting the candles, what you cannot use for lighting the candles. It is a chapter in the Mishnah, the second chapter in Shabbos. And towards the end of it, we also read about other things that people need to do before the Shabbos comes in. Mishnah 7, three things a person has to say Erev Shabbos as nighttime comes in, as nightfall comes in. Sorry, I'll get here. And those three things are a sartem, did you take maser? A ravtem, did you make an eruv? So you're able to carry. Hadliku aner, and then tell people to light the candles. And these are three things. And again, the Mishnah says that it should be said hadliku aner. The Gemara actually tells you should be said nicely. It should be said in a very calm and quiet voice rather than being domineering. And part of it is the idea that Shabbos and specifically the lighting of the candles, one of the reasons we light candles is for Shalom Bayis. If you're walking through a dark house and you trip over things and you step on something and suddenly hurt yourself and you start cursing the person that dropped that thing or that left it on the floor. Who leaves these things on the floor and why am I stepping on Lego and why am I always hurting myself, etc., etc.? And therefore, we speak about Hadlikos Aner, the candle which represents the idea of Shalom in a house, should also, you should say that nicely, you shouldn't scream it, you should say it calmly, Hadlikos Aner. And then we finish with the following Gemara. It's a Gemara in Brachos on page 64a. Amar Rabbi Elazar, Amar Rabbi Chanina. Again, we're speaking about peace. Talmidei Chachamim, Marbim Shalom Ba'alam, bring extra peace to the world. As it says, V'chol b'naich limud Hashem, all your children are those that students of Hashem. V'rav Shalom b'naich, and lots of peace will have, your children will have lots of peace. And the Gemara says, Al tikre b'naich ela b'naich. Don't read your children, but b'naich, those that build, and the Talmidei Chachamim are those that build. And then we finish off with a verse in Tehillim. Because of my brothers and friends, I will speak peace to you. Because of Hashem, I will ask for good for you. Hashem gives strength to his nation. Hashem blesses his nation with peace. The Chazan will now do a bit more about that, and we'll explain and sing a few of those parts.
Thank you, and thank you all for joining us again this week and taking time out of your schedules learn something about the tefillah and some of the music, some of the nusach, which is so important to our davening throughout the ages and up until the present day. Just to add on Bamim Malikin, some say there's very practical reasons to say it before Ma'ariv, because as the Rav said, we're discussing things that one can do on Shabbos, what can't do on Shabbos, things you have to do in preparation for Shabbos. And I think in the answer, it's mentioned that it gave people a last minute reminder, oh no, I've not made my Eruv, I've got 5 minutes to run home and get it done, or I've not taken my Maaseh, I won't be able to eat over Shabbos, got 5 minutes, 10 minutes left to run home and try and sort that out, and maybe that helped with the Shalom Bayis as well, sorting it out before it got to Shabbos and it was too late. I'm just going to touch on a few things about the final paragraph, which was the Gemara from Brachos, Amar Rabbi Elazar, Amar Rabbi Chanina, and maybe just say a few points about this is a very, very famous and well sung paragraph in Chazonim along the ages, and Chazonim such as Yossele Rosenblatt composed a beautiful piece for this. Moshe Oisha, a very famous Chazan, that was his real name, also presented a piece for this, and both of these were quite varied. Then in Shlomo Kolbach's got one of his most famous tunes for Leman Achai. I'm just going to sing a couple of excerpts of each of those so you can see a little bit of the difference in the styles. And then I'm going to finish off with a different tune. So this is just the beginning line of the Rosenblatt, Amar Rabbi Elazar. Amar Rabbi Elazar, Amar Rabbi Chanina, Omar Rabbi Elazar, Omar Rabbi Chanina, Talmidei Chachamim, Marvim Shalom Bovoyelo, Talmidei Chachamim, Marvim Shalom Bovoyelo, Omar Rabbi Elazar, Omar Rabbi Chanina. That's just the first line. It's a very classical Chazan's piece, and there's a very famous line where he gets to Shalva, one of the longest pieces of coloratura, going up to head voice in the Chazan's repertoire. I'm not going to try and sing it because I won't do it justice, but that's a very classical style, if you like. Then if you fast forwarded maybe 30, 40 years to the 1940s and 50s, Moshe Oisha was, as I say, a very famous Chazan from Romania initially, and then made famous in America. And he was also a star of Yiddish theater, and he had a Omar Rabbi Elazar, which was a bit more theatrical. I'm just going to sing the first line of Omar Rabbi Elazar from Moshe Oisha. Omar Rabbi Elazar, Omar Rabbi Chanina, Talmidei Chachamim, Marbim Shalom Bovoyelo, Shenehama v'chol bonaych limodei Hashem. And it goes on and on and on, but it's much more theatrical. The famous Shlomo Kolbach one, which I'm going to sing just one line of, because that's very much in the style of Shlomo Kolbach, where he told stories, he sang Hebrew words, and he also sang English words, and maybe that was part of what made him quite accessible for people. His Leman Achai goes as follows: Leman Achai v'reyai, Leman Achai v'reyai, Adabrona, Shalom. For the sake of my brothers and friends, for the sake of my brothers and friends, I shall speak peace to you. Peace to you. And that's just a little part of it. I'm going to finish off with Omar Rabbi Elazar, or the second part of Omar Rabbi Elazar, as was sung by Chazan Hillman. Obviously, many of you know Chazan Hillman, many years the Chazan in Crumpsall Shul. and a great Chazan. He had I don't know who it was from, but he sang an Omer Rabbi Elazar. There's a recording on YouTube, but the second half is very well known, and I sing it in our shul. Well, not from the past year, but in times we have sung it in our shul. Shalom Rav, li'oyav ne'isai rasecha, v'yein lamai michashayil, yehi shalom, v'chayelech, shalom, V'yarmenai esayich leman achai v'reveyoi adabrana shalom evach leman achai v'reveyoi adabrana shalom evach. Then there's a bit of Chazonos to finish it off, which I'm not going to do right now. But just a few different options of the music of Omer Rabbi Elazar, and you can hear different styles and different influences into those pieces themselves. We'll carry on with parts of Ma'ariv now.
Right. So as you can see, very, very varied in the way this Omer Rabbi Elazar can be sung, and as the Chazan showed you, the different styles that come. And many times you'll find also that the style of song is influenced by the kind of person that it is. So that music is very much a personal thing, and different people do things differently. And I would even go as far as to say that in different periods in their life, they will compose different songs. It's actually I'll tell this as a side story before we move on with the davening on Friday night. There was a Rav, a famous Rav in the town of Lublin, whose name was Rav Meir Shapiro. Rav Meir Shapiro was actually well known for being the founder of the Daf Yomi, and he had a massive yeshiva over there as well. And what was special about his yeshiva, what was different about his yeshiva, was that his yeshiva actually had a dormitory and that he was providing room and board for the boys, which was very, very different, because in those days, people had beds with locals and people had to eat what was called teg. You had to go different days eating by different people, which was very embarrassing because sometimes the food was better, sometimes it was worse. Sometimes the people appreciated Talmidei Chachamim and they would treat you very nicely. Sometimes they didn't really appreciate Talmidei Chachamim at all, and you'd get really treated very, very badly. And there was nothing you could do to help yourself. You were just at the mercy of all the people in the town. And this Rav Meir Shapiro created this yeshiva, and he was heading a fundraising effort. And when he did that fundraising effort, it wasn't going. And he composed the following song about these words: Im amati motaragli, if I said motaragli, that my feet have sort of caved in, Chazdecha Hashem Yisadeni, your chesed Hashem, your kindness Hashem, it will support me. And the song that he composed that time when things were really bad, he sung it in a very, very quiet, depressing way. And then the next day, somehow things went better and the collecting changed around. He was able to get enough money to be able to help his yeshiva. And that same tone, that same tune of Imamata Motar Agli, he actually quickened the pace, sang it slightly differently. And so the same song could be sung one way and another. So even within the same song and even with the same person and the same composer, you can find that at different times, they will have different modes of being able to express themselves through the nigun, through that they sing. So as you can see what the Chazan brought out over here, very important as well. So we're going to go through to the end of the first part of Ma'ariv, which is on page 282 if you have a green Chief Rabbi Siddur. If you have an Art Scroll Siddur, the newer version of it is page 336 in this Siddur, and that's V'Shamru. We get to V'Shamru, until that point, there are basically no changes except for the final thing of Eufros Aleinu Sukash Lamecha. We finish off, instead of saying Shama Ama Yisrael Ad, the one who looks after his nation Yisrael forever, we actually, again, the theme of Mashiach comes up again and again. We'll see it later on. We'll see it even in the Zmiris, that the theme of Mashiach comes up, and we say, Ufros Aleinu Sukash Lamecha, we finish off. May you spread over us the shelter of your peace, the sukkah, the shelter of your peace. Baruch atah Hashem, blessed are you. And instead of saying, Shama Am Yisrael, the one who looks after his Jewish people and guards his people forever, we say, Hapore Sukkah Shalom, the one who will spread out the shelter of peace, Oleinu upon us, Val Kol Am Yisrael, and upon the entire nation of Israel, Val Yushalayim, and upon the city of Yushalayim. Again, very messianic. And as we said, there are many messianic things that come up on Friday night, and the connection of Shabbos, as we spoke last week, that the Messiah or the time in Olam Haba will be known as Yom Shekulo Shabbos, a day that is entirely like Shabbos. And then we move on to V'Shamru. And here we will say V'Shamru on Shabbos, on Yom Tovim. We will interject with other things, Aidaba Moshes Ma'adesh B'nei Yisrael, Tikku B'Chodesh Shofar for Rosh Hashanah, etc., etc. So what you have right here before you start Shemona Esrei, we bring out this verse that speaks about the commandment that the Jewish people had to keep Shabbos. For them, it should always be an eternal bond. And again, as explained over here in the art scroll by the Abud Raham, which is one of the earliest commentators on Tefillah in the Rishonim, he says that the theme of the redemption of Shabbos observance go together, and we will be redeemed in the merit of Shabbos observance. So when we finish off with this idea of Hapore Sukkah Shalom, the one that spreads out the sukkah, the tabernacle, the shelter of peace on his people and on Jerusalem and on all the world and all the Jews. So we're asking for Mashiach to come. We move on to them. V'Shamru b'nei Yisrael Shabbos, the Jews keep the Shabbos. And that's a paragraph in the Torah that says, V'Shamru b'nei Yisrael Shabbos, the Jewish people should keep the Shabbos. La'asos as Shabbos, to make the Shabbos, l'dorosim, for the generations, b'ris olam, a covenant, an eternal covenant. And who is it between? Beinu uvein b'nei Yisrael, between me, says God, and between the Jewish people. Osi la'olam, it is a sign, a symbol forever. Ki sheishas yomim, for 6 days, also Hashem es hashamayim ha'aretz, for 6 days God made the heavens and the earth. Uvayom hashvi, on the 7th day, shavas vayinat, he rested and he was refreshed. Whatever that means as far as God is concerned, obviously he didn't need to rest or he didn't need to refresh himself, but that's not for now. That's beyond the context of for now. However, this is, so we'll have now the Chazan is going to give you some versions of what people do for V'Shamru, but this is within the motif of everything that we're davening now about redemption, Go Al Yisrael, then Shama Yisrael Ad Hapore Sukkah Shalom, then V'Shamru. It's not considered an interruption, where normally we wouldn't interrupt between Al Yushalayim and Shemona Esrei. We add an over here about Shmir Shabbos because that's not considered an interruption, but rather a continuation of the same theme.
So as Rabbi Eisenberg noted, we have the theme here is Geula, and we have a rule within Tefillah that one should not interrupt between Geula and Tefillah, which is why in Shachris, for example, where we say Go Al Yisrael and we're meant to go straight into the Amida, there is some debate about saying Amen to the Chazan's bracha, which is why sometimes the Chazan will extend his word or words or go quiet on his words so that it can minimize the question of the congregation saying Amen to the bracha, because hopefully by that stage they've started their own Shemona Esrei. They can't interrupt, but that's a separate question. So as the Rabbi said, we've got Geula and Tefillah. Some communities, because of this question of do you interrupt or not, so in Yerushalayim, the Vilna Gaon's way of leading davening, and many communities like the Yemenites, they miss out V'Shamru. They don't add in anything at this stage, but most Ashkenazic communities do say V'Shamru, or on Yom Tovim they say different phrases here as well. I always feel at this time it's important if you're thinking about a tune for the V'Shamru, first of all, there's pure, beautiful nusach and some simple, well-known communal tunes. If you're going to take another tune, there's plenty of tunes in our repertoire, across our repertoire, which are appropriate for that time. So if it's Hanukkah, try and find a Hanukkah tune. If it's Purim, try and find a Purim tune. If it's a plain Friday night and you want to sing a tune which isn't maybe normally placed with these words, at least find a tune which connected to Friday night. I heard this in a lecture series given by the late Chazan Goffin from New York, who was a teacher in Yeshiva University for Chazonim there, and Chazan for many years in Lincoln Square Shul in New York. And he said there's so many beautiful tunes for Zemiris or Lechadoidi or something else. Why would you, if you want to sing a tune for Vashomru, why would you take something from a wedding? You know, keep the weddings for the weddings and keep Friday night as Friday night. So I'm just going to sing a straightforward tune, and then maybe a Zemiris style tune to the Shomru. On this first piece, if you look out for the words, part of the importance of having someone suitably qualified or somebody who knows what they are doing and what they are saying leading the davening is that it should be appropriate. They should understand the words, and they should make sure that as best as possible they express the meaning of the words as one can to a limited degree, possibly, when they are saying the words. So just listen out. Simply at the end of this piece, we say Shamayim and Oretz. So Shamayim is the heaven and Oretz is the land. Just listen out for those words. V'shomeru v'nei Yisroel es ha-Shabbos, la'asoi es ha-Shabbos, l'doiroisam b'riso v'yelam. Beini uvein b'nei Yisroel, oisi le'yoyelam, ki sheishes yomim, Oso Hashem es hashamayim v'yes ha'aretz uvayoyim hashavi shavas vayin avafash. Just a little thing there, the contrast between in the singing between Shamayim and Oretz. Shamayim we said, as Hashamayim, pointing upwards, and the Es Ha'oretz, the tune itself went downwards, just to express within the music what we're talking about, Hashem's majesty and Hashem's greatness, that he created everything from up high to down low, and just trying to express that slightly in the way we say or sing these words. I'm just going to sing half of the Shomru as I learned from Chazan Motzen when he was here a couple of times in Manchester. He, at the conventions, which Alex, of course, organized, and we hosted a couple in our shul, he sang a Hasidish Zemiris from the words of Peroik of Kori Bain, which is one of the Zemiris on Friday night. He sang that to the Shomru. It's quite slow, so I'm just going to sing half of it. V'shamru v'nei Yisroel es ha-Shabbos la'asois es ha-Shabbos l'davayiroisam v'risayelam beini uvein b'nei Yisroel ois hi le'vayavam. The tune itself repeats. It changes a bit at the end, but it was just the idea of using a tune from Zemiris. That itself was a Hasidish tune, using Hasidish tune from Zemiris, from the Friday night table, taking that to within the Friday night davening as well.
Okay, so we move on now through the Amida. In the Amida, obviously, we're not going. It's Mariv, so we will not have a repetition of the Amida. So there's nothing to be sung over there. You can sing it to yourself quietly if you want to during davening. But there's no part that the Chazan plays within that. And then afterwards, we move to the next part. First, we read about Vayechuda Shemayim V'Atzachol Tzva'am, which was already said in the Silent Shemona Esrei, but is repeated again afterwards. That this is an edus. It's like saying testimony. It's a witness statement of God's creating the heavens and the earth. Usually the entire community say it together. And even if you have an individual that has missed his opportunity to say it originally, you'll find people coming over if they've davened Shemona Esrei for longer or they've had to go out or whatever else it was. They'll try to find somebody else to say Vayechulu with, so that Vayechulu is said because it is a testimony, because it's an edus, it's said as two people as opposed to only one person. And then we move into what's known as Birchas Mein Sheva, which is translated over here, the seven-faceted blessing. It's page 346 in the Art Scrolls. And if you have a green Chief Rabbi Siddur, you'd be looking at page 294. And this over here is a shortened version of the Shemona Esrei. That's what's called the seven-faceted blessing. On Shabbos, instead of saying 19 blessings and the Amidah, we have gotten rid of all of the middle blessings and replaced them with one middle blessing only. So you have normally what you were supposed to have. You would have the three first blessings, Magen Avram, Ata Gibor, Ata Kadosh. Then you'd have all the middle blessings that ask for things. And then the last three blessings, which is Ritzei, Modim, and Sim Shalom or Shalom Rav, depending on Shachris or Mincha Mariv. On Shabbos, you'll find you have the same three blessings, Magen Avram, Ata Gibor, Ata Kodesh. Then you have the middle blessing, which is known as Kiddush Hayom. That one speaks about specifically the day of Shabbos and the sanctity of Shabbos, different for Friday night, Shabbos morning, Musaf, and for Mincha Shabbos, each one different. And lastly, you have also the last three blessings, which is the blessing of Ritzei, Modim, and Sim Shalom. So now we have a short repetition of it. It's not said in, this was actually a lot heavily debated. This piece was heavily debated last year in the summer when people had garden midyanim, when people had other midyanim, would they not be allowed to say Magen Avos? But it's a shortened version. So Magen Avos Bidbara is about the Avos, that's Magen Avram, Mechayim Mesim Amaro, the one who revives the dead with his sayings, with his utterances. So that is Ata Gibor, which speaks Mechayim Mesim, Hokela Kosh Enkamo, God, there's nobody like him. Hamniach Lama B'Yom Shabbos Kosh, you speak about Shabbos. And then you finish off Lafonov Nava B'Yer V'Fachad. Before him we will serve with fear and with trepidation. That is Ritzei, which we hope that we will daven to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We will come back to Shabbat. Lishmo, this is Modim, we will thank him. B'Choyom Tamid. And then you say, Kela Hodos, the God whom we give thanks to, Adon HaShalom, Sim Shalom, the one who is the master of peace. So this is a beautiful piece. So we have over here a small version of the bigger picture of the Shemona Esrei. The Chazan is now going to speak more about this, and I'm going to hand over to the Chazan to regale you further.
Thank you. So again, when it comes to this piece of davening of Magen Avos, the way it's done is the congregation recites it or sings it, and wherever you go around the world, really, there's only really one basic tune sung by congregations for this part of davening, and then generally the Chazan repeats it, and there could be gabbled through by the Chazan, said through by the Chazan may say it along with the congregation, which is something we've sort of done during Corona, just to keep the davening moving. Unfortunately, with trying to, because of the situation we're in and trying to minimize the time, we are potentially exposed to other people, etc., trying to squeeze the davening. So this is one of the areas where we've tried to speed up the davening slightly. But there are great Chazan's pieces for this. And, if you were in a shul and there was a choir or a Shabbaton, and we had a concert here where Chazan Malavani sang a lengthy piece for Magin Ovis. But I'm going to sing tonight something slightly different. It's not the traditional Magin Ovis. It's actually a tune from Sol Zim, who has appeared here in Manchester. I know he's a great friend of Alex's. This is a tune, I'm pretty sure I learned this at the very first Chazan's convention I went to about 2006, 2007. Solzin wasn't there, but somebody sang this and said it's a very nice, easy tune to learn, and it is. So I'm going to sing it for you tonight. Mogen Avos bidvarai mechayim meisim b'mamarai hokel HaKadosh shein kamoihu haminiach leyamai b'yoyim Shabbos kodeshoi kivam rotza lehaniach lohem lefonov na'avoid b'yirav v'fachad v'noideh lishmoi v'chol yom tamid me'yein haberachos v'noideh lishmoi v'chol yom tamid me'yein haberachos keil ha'yadavos Adain HaShalom Mekadesh HaShabbos Umevarech Shavi Umeniach B'Kedusha Liyamdu Shnei Yoyneg Zecher L'Maaseh V'Reshis. Something a bit different. I don't know if anyone's ever heard that. I myself probably only sung it a few times, but hope you like something slightly different.
Right. Okay. We're now going to finish the davening. So after that, you have the full Kaddish. Then, again, as we said previously, according to the Minhag Anglia, you would say the davening of, you'd say the Mishnah B'mei Madlikin. And then we move on to something else. This is, again, a minhag that different people have and that different people don't have within shul. And that is the Kiddush on Friday night. So if you have a look in the, sorry, I've lost my art scroll. In the olden days, you used to have people coming to shul, sleeping in shul, eating in shul, because there wasn't the same level of hospitalities available to people. People didn't have the same size housing, etc., etc. And so the Gemara asks, why do people make Kiddush in shul? And it says, what do you mean? There are people that stay in shul. There are people that were traveling from one place to another. There were no hotels. There were no inns. And so therefore, they had to hear Kiddush in shul. So you'll find on page 348 in the art scroll and on page 302 in the Chief Rabbis, before Aleinu, you will find Kiddush actually. And that Kiddush is said by some congregations. Some congregations do not have the minhag to say Kiddush. So many of the more Haredi congregations, you won't find Kiddush in, whereas in the United Synagogue shuls, almost exclusively, you will find that they do say Kiddush. Our shul has not said Kiddush, as the Chazan mentioned before. We've made some changes during Corona. One of those changes during Corona has been currently we don't make Kiddush because we don't want to have any food or drink around, because food or drink again lends itself to contamination, other things. And so that's why we have temporarily suspended saying Kiddush on Friday night. Surely, Emitz Hashem, as we see already, we have a bit of a roadmap. Hopefully we'll be able to stick to that roadmap and it won't be longer than what they said, although I do have a feeling that the roadmap won't be exactly, we won't be able to stick to it exactly as it is. It'll probably take slightly longer than what the Prime Minister set out. Hopefully, please God, by June definitely, or by Rosh Hashanah at the latest, we'll be able to resume saying Kiddush within Shul. And as soon as things are safe, we will definitely go back to being saying Kiddush in Shul. This is only a temporary measure. It's not something that we will have gotten rid of. So here the Chazan says Kiddush in Shul, as I said before, and then you move on to Aleinu. Just hold on 1 second. So we move on to Aleinu. So you have the Kiddush, then you have Aleinu, and then we finish off with, in certain congregations, again in our congregations, we do this, we finish off with Yigdal. You find the Yigdal in the Chief Rabbi Siddur on page 308. So at the end of Davening, you'll find Yigdal over there. Interestingly enough, in the Art Scroll Siddur, you will find Adon Olam, and you don't find Yigdal. So some congregations will say Adon Olam, some congregations will say Yigdal over there, although most congregations I've been to have recited Yigdal at night and Adon Olam in the morning. That's in general how it's been. And we spoke about Yigdal when we spoke about it at the time around Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur time, with our special tunes and special motifs for Yom Tov, had a different Yigdal, that one as the Chazan did previously. And we speak over here about the 13 animamins, the 13 principles of faith that are set out. I guess Shabbos is a principle of our faith. A lot of our faith hinges on Shabbos, so that you say, if you want to talk about somebody being a frum Jew, if you want, it's an interesting one, but if you want to talk about somebody being religious, you will ask the question, is he Shomer Shabbat? You don't say, is he Shomer Kashrut or whatever. You say it about somebody, if you want to talk about a religious Jew, forgetting about which stripe of religious, right? In general, all across the board, you'll say, is he Shomer Shabbos? Is this person? So it shows you that Shabbos is very much the basis of our emunah, the basis of our faith. And so at the end of the Friday night davening, which has been very much about with two motifs, one about Geula and one about Shabbos, we also finish off with Yigdal, which is this poem about the 13 principles of faith, reaffirming our faith in HaKadosh Baruch Hu and a lot of the other things that we believe, which we've already discussed. If you want to go back to the previous recordings, you'll be able to see we've discussed that a little bit more in detail over there. What the different principles of faith are. This could be a series on its own. I know it, people have given a whole series just on Yigdal, so I don't really, it's not right at this juncture to go on too much about Yigdal. So I'll hand back to the Chazan, who will just give you some versions of Yigdal of Friday night.
Thank you. So this Yigdal I'm going to sing, which is traditionally sung, the version which is sung in the Anglo world and around the world is called Leone's Yigdal. And Maya or Michael Leone was the Chazan in the Great Synagogue in London in 1760s, 1770s, and he composed this tune for Yigdal, and it's still sung to this day. Again, in the Blue Book, it's written with the harmonies for either a female mixed choir or a choir with young boys to take the soprano roles, the alto roles, but beautiful harmonies when sung well. But it's still sung in many shuls to this day on a Friday night, and it dates back to London 250 odd years ago. And he was the Chazan in the great synagogue in London. He had an interesting career, this Leone. He became an opera singer while still the Chazan in the shul, and then he thought he would specialize in operas. So again, he was talked about like Dudu Fisher in the modern times, that he wouldn't perform on a Friday night. So the newspapers spoke about it at the time, that it was amazing that he was a lead soloist in whichever performance and wouldn't perform on a Friday night. Eventually, he quit the shul to focus on his opera career, and then it didn't go so well, so he had to get himself a job as a chazan again, but nobody would have him in London, so he went to Jamaica and he became chazan in Jamaica. and passed away in Jamaica and was buried in the cemetery in Jamaica. So there you go, it's a bit of nostalgia or whatever trivia of the Chazonim from the 1750s. But his Yigdal, just talk about influences. This Yigdal, this piece and his tune is one of the few tunes that I'm aware of. I'm not an expert musicologist, but it's one of the few tunes which has gone from the Jewish world and ended up in the church, as opposed to what a lot of people say is some of our tunes, and some chazonim and some choir masters were heavily influenced by the church and brought the church into the shul, especially in the mid 1800s when the reform movement in Germany was at its peak or was growing, and they were very much trying to put Judaism and Jewish worship on par with the Gentile worship and building shuls, synagogues in the same style and bringing in and everyone facing the front and all the action at the front, so the bimmer and at the front, just like the altar, and introducing the organ, mimicking, unfortunately, the way bringing the church into the shul. This was a case that the shul made it into the church, and there's this is all from the internet. I'm not an expert on this, but somebody came and heard this chazan in shul and really liked his song. And he was a fellow called Thomas Oliver who wrote hymns, and he wrote a hymn loosely based on Yigdal, but changing it slightly to make it Christian themed. But the tune is spot on to Yigdal, as was sung by Leone and is still sung in shul every Friday night. So the hymn is called The God of Abraham Praise, and it's available on the internet. If you want to listen to a couple of lines of that, you'll hear it's exactly how we sing Yigdal. Anyway, just again, a little bit of trivia. I'm going to sing a few lines of Yigdal and join in at home. Yigdal Elohim Echai V'yishtabach Nimtzov Yehenes El Metziusa Echad V'yen Yachid Keyichuda Lam V'gam Ein Tzayv Liachtusar Ein Eloi Demus Aguf V'yen Aguf Loi Na'aroi Chelav Kiddush Asa Kadmoin L'chol Davar Asher Nivra Rishon V'yein Reishis L'Reishisa Hina Yadonai Lam L'chol Na'itza Yoyreg Gedulasai U'Malchusa Shefa Nevuasa Nesana Elan Shei Segulasai V'Sifarata, etc., etc. You know the rest of it.
Right, okay, ladies and gentlemen, we have been going now for over 45 minutes, and therefore I'd like to call it over here. We will continue. I saw that there was some discussion in the chat about having more things. So we'll have please be in touch. We will consider doing more. The Chazan and I obviously will be very happy to do more of these. The next one, if we do one, we could actually even consider doing it next week. But more importantly, the next thing that we would do is we would focus on, instead of focusing on the Shabbos morning davening, what we would actually do is we would focus on the Zemiros. So we'd start with Shalom Aleichem, Eishes Chayil, and then go through some of the very famous Zemiros, something like Menucha V'Simcha, Yom Zad Yisrael, Kariban Olam, and Tzur Mishalo. There's a lot of, even though they're poetically written, a lot of these things, there is so much reference in it to either halacha or midrash within these mirrors that it's a shame that people think that they're only songs. And you can even learn the halacha, and you can even learn very, very special things about Shabbos by understanding or by knowing these things. So therefore, it's something that we look forward to doing in general, just by maybe either by a show of hands, or maybe or if you could just, I think you can raise your hand. If you go to your to your participant, if you go to the participants, if you just, it says as you can raise your hand. So if you have a look over there, so we have how many people? 3 people raising their hands so far. Somebody clapping. Okay, that's 4, 6. Okay, so it looks like there's plenty of 7. So there's plenty of or back to 6. Okay, moving back and forth. Either way, so we will, the Chazan and I will come up with dates, and we will advertise those dates to you, please God, when we're able to, and we will try to make another series about this idea of the Zmiris, and maybe continuing on after the Zmiris, we will move on to Shabbos morning davening. So we'll keep you posted exactly when this will happen, and please God, we'll look forward to that. One more thing that I would like to say, Shaina, do you want to say something? Are you raising your hand for that reason?
Yeah, I am. I was just going to ask. Firstly, it's been beautiful, thank you. Secondly, Zmiros would be wonderful, but I'm just wondering whether it'd be nice to do Pesach songs for people who maybe don't know some of the tunes,
So
or just
nearer
enjoy
to Pesach, we can do that.
hearing them.
Yeah, so we'll do that nearer to Pesach. Maybe we'll deal with the Haggadah. We'll do that. We'll do Haggadah in thought and song, and we can do something similar to that just with Pesach, maybe for 2 weeks before Pesach.
Thank you.
What I just wanted to say, especially for people over here, that seems a lot of people here that appreciate music, on Purim Day, I'm not sure yet of the time, but on Purim Day, probably around 1 or 1:30 in the afternoon, whilst we'll be in the middle of our Suda, we will, my son and I, and maybe more of my children, will be having a small kumzitz. We'll send out a little bit of, a poster or something, a reminder to everybody to let you know. We'll be singing songs, maybe even taking some requests. It will be on this same Zoom link, so probably around 1:30. Join us then if you'd like to during your Purim Suda. We'll have a bit of l'chaim together. We'll sing together, and hopefully we'll have a great time together. In the meantime, thank you so much, all of you, for joining us. Thank you for supporting this event. And please, God, we look forward to having many, many more of these events. Thank you very much. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you both.
Thank you. Thank you. Very good.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Oh, and by the way, the Chumash and Megillah Shir will be in 10 minutes back on this Zoom room as well.
Okay.
Where